Hey, welcome back. Wiley is having her breakfast. Cats have their priorities. Now, you will know that John Burroughs, US Air Force, James Warrow, Race Hobbs, and myself are working on a larger project of what really happened at the Rendlesham Forest Incident, and it's fascinating. And one of the key places that you've heard me talk about if you followed the Rendlesham Forest Incident is this place, Orfordness. Orfordness is Britain's largest military physics weapon test site. It's where they did difficult stuff. It's away from people, but it's also only an hour and a half from London, from the corridors of power at the MOD, the people funding them. And for many years, it was a government, UK government test laboratory. And many people who worked there in radar and for AWRE, Atomic Weapons Research, are still alive, and they are incredibly loyal. They do respect the Official Secrets Act, but many things that they worked on are very interesting. And if we fully understand the type of projects, the weapons that they were building, it might shed a new light on actually what might have really happened in the Bentwaters, Rendlesham, Woodbridge, Orfordness, and Martlesham Heath incident, commonly known as the Rendlesham Forest Incident. So today I'm going to share 3 bits of basic research with you, because that's what I do. Social media science. I value your input. If you hear what I'm about to tell you today, and it resonates with a project you worked on back in the Cold War, and you are prepared to share bits of what happened without revealing or exposing national security, I would really appreciate it. So let's deep dive, literally, under Orfordness. We kind of know quite a lot about what went on the surface. It's been revealed to me by 3 very kind gentlemen who worked at Orfordness that some of the secrets at Orfordness are not visible. They're actually under Orfordness. And that opens a whole new field of research. How did the advanced weaponization of physics, I think that's the best way to describe it, the dark physics of the Cold War, be powered at Orfordness, a remote shingle spit off the east coast of England? And today, a fascinating piece of hidden history. What did Orfordness do with excess radiation? So I'm reaching out to you, the YouTube and Patreon audience, to join the dots. It's a jigsaw. What do these 3 bits of information mean? First of all, when the National Trust took over the now closed Orfordness site, they needed to know, for public safety, what was underneath. Now, I didn't realise there was anything underneath. It appears like a natural feature, it's a shingle bank. But no, underneath Orfordness is a whole lot of stuff which you don't know about. Number 1, and these plans are no longer publicly available since 9/11. The CEGB, if you're British, you'll know what that means. The Central Electricity Generating Board used to provide digger hotlines for contractors not to burst them with their backhoe, or JCB as we call them in Britain. So the National Trust needed to know what was down there, and they were privy to secret now CEGB plans. And what they reveal is a massive power system, a grid of large diameter cables stretching from, of course, Sizewell A nuclear power station that had a dedicated switch room for the Ministry of Defence. They provided the power to the Orfordness physics experiments down the coast just a few miles to Bawdsey, where there's a secret underground physics laboratory, and inland to, strangely, RAF Bentwaters. Okay. And on just a few miles to Adastral House, the post office, British Telecom. Not really. Adastral House is Britain's secret MOD computing centre where high-level physics in-computing control is done. And it's a shared building. Okay, BT, British Telecom, do run it. They have offices and laboratories there. But the vast complex has companies like Marconi. It housed Britain's phone tapping, microwave tapping research lab, and very much it was the headquarters of USAFE, US Air Force, Europe's communication center from the whole of Europe back to the US on a floor that was guarded. So the power cable system under Orfordness is known about. But what I'm going to tell you next isn't so known about. A veteran of the Orfordness days who worked on microwave research, probably dating back from the early magnetron and radar days, said that when they were producing vast amounts of just blank energy to test the actual magnetrons and transmitters, that energy really just couldn't be dissipated. It needed an absorption system. And under Orfordness is what he describes as a leaky coaxial cable farm, a giant snake of wires under the nest, which would absorb the excessive microwave energy produced by these Cold War dark physics weaponization experiments. And he describes a funny incident which he was prepared to share with me, and that is, it heated up Orfordness. The stones got warm, and often it dissipated the Suffolk fog over the nest because it was rather warm. It's such a great story. It's so British. We warmed the stones. Yeah, you were building a weapon system, mate. And the third is really interesting, and it's a little complicated. Now, in Britain, we call the green and yellow cable an earth, and in America, you call it the ground cable. Hold that thought. The Cobra Mist over-the-horizon system was a very high-powered electrical device, also part of the Sizewell A and later Sizewell B interconnect, the power grid system, and it needed to be earthed or grounded. You needed a radar system to be grounded or earthed to get a return through our planet. I've recently heard an interesting story from somebody who worked there. Now, Orfordness and Eastern England is prone to severe flooding. There's been terrible floods in East Anglia over the years. So it was prudent to build the Cobra Mist headquarters, the actual computing center where the people were and the equipment, up on stilts. Here's the classic Cobra Mist headquarters. It looks great, but notice the stilts. It's a good 5 to 15 feet above the water level if it flooded, just to protect it. That gave the engineers who worked there, this person who told me this story, a challenge, because they needed to earth or ground the radar to get a stable ground return from planet Earth when they sent out their signal and bounced it off the ionosphere to look at things that moved in the Soviet Union. And it didn't work. He claims he's an electrical engineer and later went on to work at the BBC as a transmission engineer, that one of the issues was because the Cobra Mist building was up on stilts, and instead of having a centralized ground or earth plate underneath Orfordness, the company who built it put in the ground system willy-nilly. It's a good British term, randomly, as they required an earth cable for a computing system, a bit of radar technology, or anything. They just ran a cable down the legs and into the ground underneath the Cobra Mist building. He claims that that was a massive problem, because now you've got multiple grounds and they interfere. So you've got this ground loop. Now, I'm not an electrical engineer. If you are an electrical engineer, why? Explain to me, please. I want to know, why would multiple grounds or multiple earth points for the same or similar equipment all working together, but with separate earths, cause a problem? He kindly pointed that out to me. He's also very angry about his sudden lack of employment there. In the 1970s, men with plastic screwdrivers kept equipment going. It needed tweaking. It needed technicians to keep this equipment running. And he went to work normally from his home in Ipswich, and the following day when he turned up, he was fired. And that led to it was against British employment law. You had to give somebody notice. And I think he is quite interested in exposing some of the things that went wrong with Cobra Mist. But I need your help. I need to know what multiple grounds or multiple Earths for a complex could do. Is that an issue? Supposedly it is, but I don't really understand. So, social, media, science. You and I can solve these kind of issues. Little bits of tidbits of information about how sizable a nuclear power station had an interconnect to Orfordness. I've spoken to people who worked at Marconi, who worked in Martlesham Heath, and of course people from Bawdsey Manor who know a lot about radar. But I think Orfordness holds more secrets. Deep underneath this English shingle bank are some big clues to what might have really happened up the road at Rendlesham Forest. I'm going to leave you today with a tantalizing piece of information. You've heard that the RFI Rendlesham Forest Incident was the lighthouse. The guys saw a flashing light from the beacon at Orfordness Lighthouse through the trees inside Rendlesham Forest. That is not true. The injuries that John Burroughs sustained did not come from a lighthouse. But here's something very strange. In some ways, the lighthouse is part of the mystery. The lighthouse wasn't just a lighthouse. Have you noticed that the lighthouse doesn't exist anymore? It was taken down brick by brick, not only because it might fall into the sea, as they claimed, but inside information to me from the people who demolished it and filmmakers in BBC Norwich who covered the Orfordness story for BBC Look East tell me there's more to the story than meets the eye. Orfordness Lighthouse was far more than a rotating beacon. It was a tower used by the military to transmit signals. Maybe to Rendlesham Forest. I hope you're intrigued. This is the kind of things that I really like to work on for you, and you know more than I do. I'm putting all this together. If you've got even a tiny bit of this jigsaw that you're willing to share with me, get in touch either through Patreon or through YouTube, or email me. My email address is in the About Me page on YouTube. And together, we can get to the bottom of this, because the truth is out there. But hang on, don't go anywhere. I thought, as a treat, and for people who don't really know anything about Orfordness, here's a film all about it. Orfordness, a 10-mile-long shingle spit on the Suffolk coast. One of the most extraordinary places in Britain. For the greater part of the 20th century, it was one of the most secret experimental military sites in the country. Here, armed guards, not commonplace in Britain, discouraged outside interest. As boffins worked to challenge and change the course of world history. Today, you can still see the specialist buildings, unique structures that were built to experiment, test, and conceal the truth. Possibly some of the most significant experiments conducted at Orfordness took place under the auspices of the Ionospheric Research Station, set up by the brilliant Robert Watson Watt. At a committee meeting of the Scientific Study of Air Defence, it was suggested to Watson Watt that a Nikola Tesla idea called the death ray might be developed to stop enemy aircraft. It is commonly believed that this was a radio energy beam that could eliminate aircraft by frying them. But my research has found it's more likely to be an EM pulse device that disrupted electrical circuits, possibly over a great distance. Watson Watt was to test the plans given or sold to the UK government by Tesla. He chose the clandestine site, Orfordness. After bothering a hapless flock of Suffolk sheep, he rejected the death ray as impractical. Due to enormous energy transmission demands and the shortcomings of the technology available at the time. But he suggested there was potential to use a modified system of the Tesla death ray as a radio detection system. The Ionospheric Research Station was built as a cover for the development of radio detection systems that briefly became RDF, Radio Direction Finding, and we now know today radar, radio detection and ranging. The world's first ever purpose-built radar masts were installed at Orfordness in 1935. Built by Harland and Wolff of Belfast. In 1945, Orfordness was handed over to the Royal Aircraft Establishment, RAE, a government research organisation that had various names and roles during its lifetime. In 1953, the Atomic Weapons Research Establishment, AWRE, moved in and appears to have had exclusive control of this site. This is the shadowy Cold War period at Orfordness. Despite Britain's crucial contribution to the US-funded Manhattan Project during World War II, which produced the world's first nuclear weapons, wartime collaboration in this area ended after the death of President Roosevelt in 1945, when the Americans refused to share the plans of the atomic bomb. Despite Britain's precarious economic state at the time, and despite the ambitious commitments made by the new Labour government, including the creation of the National Health Service, in 1946 a secret cabinet committee decided that Britain should pursue its own independent atomic program. The earliest research took place here in North Wales under the codename Tube Alloys. Their job was to figure out the chemistry of uranium enrichment. The nuclear weapons were built here, at a place known by its workers as the Bomb Factory, in the small village of Aldermaston. much practical information was missing from the British atomic bomb program. They needed to develop, build and test their own focused implosion explosives and fashion an atom bomb casing that could be safely dropped from a British V-bomber. Flying out of Farnborough, our V-bombers would carry mock-ups of British atom bombs to Orfordness for drop testing. There were inevitably a few accidents. One inert atom bomb fell off its bomb bay hook and rested precariously on the bomb bay doors, forcing the pilots to drop it into the Thames estuary, where it lies today, undiscovered in the London clay and mud. Another was accidentally dropped a bit early and fell short into a Suffolk farmer's field, but this was all hush-hush, taking place at a time when nobody really spilled the beans. Orfordness is one of the few places where purpose-built facilities were created for testing atomic weapons and their components. Blue Danube, Britain's first atomic bomb, was lowered by crane into these specially constructed pagoda roof pits to be tested. Tests were designed to imitate the extreme conditions such weapons would be subject to prior to detonation. Vibration, high temperatures, shocks, G-forces. It has always been maintained that no fissile material was involved in tests, but high explosive initiators were present, and any accident could have had devastating consequences to the Suffolk Seagulls. Against the odds, Britain's first atomic bomb was successfully detonated on the 3rd of October 1952. In the Montebello Islands off the northwest coast of Australia. Carelessly, fallout spread inland and badly affected Aboriginal villages. As the Cold War got rather hot, Orfordness was found to be ideally suited for advanced radar testing, isolated, secret and, most importantly, facing Eastern Europe. From 1968, an Anglo-American project codenamed Cobra Mist occupied a huge area on the northern edge of the Ness. This involved a top-secret over-the-horizon OTH backscatter radar system called 441 Alpha. It was extremely expensive and apparently plagued by severe noise, probably caused by a Soviet blocking device, which ultimately led to its premature closure. In fact, it probably never worked and was scrapped a few days after it was turned on. Inside information suggests the Soviets had detailed knowledge of the frequencies Cobra Mist used, rendering it useless before it could be used against them. Inevitably, there are other stories about Orfordness. Rumours of a World War II secret German invasion of England, and the infamous UFO sighting in nearby Rendlesham Forest. I was told by an unnamed Orford radio technician the location of this UFO sighting is perfectly aligned with the high-power Cobra Mist radar beam, which often cause strange electrical discharges in the form of glowing lights on local houses' TV aerials. Other countries have developed successful over-the-horizon radar. Here is a short film from the French radar station and a good explanation of how the system works.
Nostradamus was designed and built by the French Aerospace Research Agency, AWRE, for the Ministry of Defense. It is made up of 288 emitting and receiving antennas, placed in a star pattern in 3 equally spaced arms. Each antenna emits a low-frequency electromagnetic wave from 3 to 30 megahertz. The advantage of these low-frequency signals is that they reflect off the ionosphere at altitudes ranging from 100 to 300 kilometers. This gigantic virtual mirror reflects a signal that illuminates a quadrangle of approximately 500 kilometers on one side. Any vehicle moving within the radar field sends an echo back to the receiving antennas. Depending on the wave's frequency and angle of emission, the signal will be reflected off different layers in the ionosphere, which means that the radar can target zones 800 to 3,000 kilometers away. A powerful computer automatically calibrates the system and also chooses the frequency according to propagation conditions. Nostradamus is a real all-weather radar. The waves emitted by the radar are the sum total of the output signals of all antennas in service. The system's supercomputer coordinates all antennas in each of the equidistant arms. This means that the resulting signal can be sent in any direction over 360 degrees. At a range of 800 kilometers, the radar covers a circular area of about 2,200 kilometers wide. Since this is a true all-weather omnidirectional radar, it can be used for a number of functions. Detection is based on the Doppler principle and is easier the faster the object is moving. When set in a fixed position over a given zone, it can track the paths of all aircraft flying over that zone. With Nostradamus, the research carried out by the Department of Electromagnetism and Radar of AWRE continues to push the boundaries of radar detection well beyond the horizon.
Today, visitors can walk on the Orford Shingle Beach Nature Reserve. There are scarce hints to its illustrious past. But buried under the stones are dark secrets of a hidden history. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly enjoyed making it, and I'd like to reach out to some people who have really helped. First of all, to John Griffin, who's a volunteer at the National Trust at Orfordness. He really knows the history of the place. Thank you, John. And to Vol Air Alto Drones, thank you so much for letting me use your amazing drone footage of the secret sites. And as always, a giant thank you to Tony Anthony Del Duca, who's a fantastic composer and knows exactly the mood and style of my films. Thanks, mate. But there's some invisible people behind the scenes who really help. And that's my Patreons. Thank you all so much. Without your help, I could not make these films. Via Patreon, we have built a community of inquiring minds, a science club of great people who suggest film content, ask great questions, do research, and actually help make these films. If you would like to get involved, click on this link below or in the description, and here's just a small selection of names of patrons who have really helped. Thank you so much.